Well, thank you, Robin, for that warm welcome and introduction. We're now well into the season of Advent, a time of preparation for the 13 holy nights and then the birth of Christ, as celebrated on January the 6th as a remembrance of his baptism. Many of you heard my Mistech webinar almost a week ago when I spoke about how Leonardo da Vinci depicted these two boys, both named Jesus, one from Matthew and one from Luke, and how they were merged following Passover when the Luke Jesus was accidentally left behind in Jerusalem. I also showed this painting by Leonardo student Bernardino de Beto, also known as Pinturicchio, done in 1501. You see Joseph and Mary approaching from the right and two children departing on the left. These two are framed by five men with different color robes. The fifth would be the Hierophant who conducted the merger as claimed in several prophecies that said, the two will become one in thine hand. You see Jesus in the middle saying just that with his hands. And we saw this by Leonardo's student Bernardino Luini. This Jesus among the doctors also has this hand gesture over the heart of Jesus that says the two will become one. Both these paintings have the title Virgin of the Rocks. One is hung in the National Gallery of London, while the other is in the Louvre of Paris. The Louvre is considered to be the original, begun while Leonardo was still in Florence, while the other was done in Leonardo's studio in Milan, with other artists participating. In the Louvre, the light is from the sun, while the National Gallery seems to be illuminated by moonlight. In my Mistech lecture, we found that Leonardo, with the help of his students, was able to show how Christ came for all of humanity, embedded in the stories of Matthew and Luke were two different streams of humanity that reached their resolution by merging out of love within the Holy of the Holies. With these dualities merged, Christ could enter such a human body at the baptism. This story, if told solely by Leonardo, would have led to the Inquisition condemning him to death as a heretic. By spreading his insight out over so many paintings and painters, a mystery was revealed in plain sight that was yet invisible to the Inquisition. Sheer genius on the part of Leonardo. In this vein, I found it fascinating that Rudolf Steiner said that it was part of his own mission to unite the Cain and Abel streams within humanity. Thus, our preparation for the birth of Christ in us is to unite within our soul that which will rebalance us and merge us with all of humanity. Luke traces his lineage back 77 generations to Adam, who was the Son of God. What's not said is that when Adam and Eve fell from Eden due to succumbing to the temptation of Lucifer, the Elohim knew that this new path of evolution would take humans into a realm wherein their body would become corrupted. They realized that they had to hold back their archetype of man. In the Kabbalah, this is called Adam Kadmon. But now comes a very complicated question. We know from ancient texts, including the letters written by Paul, that the human being consists of body, soul, and spirit. And we know from anthroposophy that our body consists of a physical, an etheric, and an astral body. St. Paul wrote in a letter known as 1 Corinthians 3:6, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? And in Thessalonians 5:23, Paul mentions Each of us consists of spirit, soul, and body. At that time, this was well known by those of that region and probably everywhere on earth. Then, when this merging occurred, what from these two boys was discarded and what was used to form the Jesus of Nazareth from age 12 to 30? We'll come to that. First, in 869, at the Eighth Ecumenical Council, it was declared that the teaching of two souls was a heresy. Although this dual nature of the soul was not intended to be conceived of as two different souls, by that time, knowledge of the spirit and the soul had been or was being lost. Without mediation of spirit, the soul was reduced to only guiding the body, and thus the spirit was lost. With this reduced concept of the human being, we enter the Middle Ages and then the Renaissance and now our times. We might want to moan about this loss, but it was necessary for humanity to attain the freedom necessary to develop an I consciousness. From 869 to today, Christmas has more and more lost its meaning, and in recent times it has become fully commercialized. Many people are haunted today about a deep feeling of superficiality in their celebration of Christmas. The warm feelings which for centuries inspired people at the Christmas festival have been lost. From Rudolf Steiner, this quote, "We need a new Christmas, a new holy night, reminding us not only of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, but also a celebration of the birth of a new Christ impulse. Today, we need something more than the mere remembrance of the day of the birth of Jesus. We need to understand and realize that a new Christmas festival must arise, that a new festival of birth must lead on from the present into the immediate future. A new Christ impulse must be born and a new knowledge of the nature of Christ. We need a new understanding of the truth that the divine spiritual heavens and the physical world of earth are linked to one another, and that the mystery of Golgotha is the most significant token of this union. We must understand once again the Christ as a cosmic being who united himself with the earth. Now, this painting is by Leonardo's student Bernardino da Conti. It shows he knew all about the other paintings I've shown, plus several I don't have time to show. Note that Jesus on our left has royal robes behind him. Now note the Jesus on the right with the three crosses, that is, the three on Golgotha, or his halo. It will be the destiny of this body to one day hang on a cross. At this point, we'll leave behind the Matthew Jesus to ask questions about this body of Jesus on the right. Luke traces his lineage back 77 generations to Adam, who was the Son of God. What's not said is that when Adam and Eve fell from Eden due to succumbing to the temptation of Lucifer, the Elohim knew that this new path of evolution would take humans into a realm wherein their body would become corrupted. They realized that they had to hold back their archetype of man. In the Kabbalah, this is called Adam Kadmon. Jewish philosopher Philo wrote, quote, "As being born in the image of God, he has no participation in any corruptible or earth-like essence." In GA 94, Rudolf Steiner agrees. This cosmic being from whom the man of today and all the kingdoms of nature have issued is referred to in the Kabbalah as Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon embraced all the manifold aspects of man as we know him today in the various races and peoples, end quote. So all of humanity, except for this archetype, descended from the spiritual world to the physical world, wherein, over lifetimes, our phantom body becomes corrupted. Knowing that humanity would need an uncorrupted phantom body to achieve its goal of Atman, the gods plan to have Christ descend to save humanity from this corruption. He becomes the second Adam. Our bodily phantom is our oldest member. It cannot be seen with the physical eye. The clairvoyant who has seen the midnight sun, that is, seen the sun at midnight through the earth, that person can see the phantom body of another. The phantom was what was first there of the physical body of man in the beginning. It is a transparent body of force. What the physical eye sees are the physical substances which a person eats and takes into himself, and they fill out the invisible phantom. The human phantom, the primal form, draws into itself the material elements that fill out the physical body and are laid aside at death. It had degenerated in the course of time up to the mystery of Golgotha. At the beginning of human evolution, it was intended that the phantom should remain untouched by the material elements of our environment. But Lucifer's influence brought about a close connection between the phantom and the forces which man absorbs through his earthly evolution, a connection particularly with the ashy constituents. The result was that the phantom, while continuing to accompany man during his further evolution, was strongly drawn to these ashy constituents, and instead of adhering to the etheric body, it attracted itself to these products of disintegration. But where the luciferic influences had been kept away, as they were from the Nathan Jesus, no force of attraction arose between the phantom and the material elements that had been taken into the bodily organism. Throughout the 3 years, from the baptism up to the mystery of Golgotha, the phantom remained untouched by these elements. In occult terms, we can say the human phantom, according to its intended development through the Saturn, Sun, and Moon periods, should not have been attracted to the ashy constituents, but only to the dissolving salt constituents, so that it would have taken the path of volatilization insofar as the salt constituents are dissolvable. In an occult sense, one can say that it would have dissolved and passed over, not into the earth, but into the volatile constituents. The remarkable fact is that with the baptism in the Jordan and the entry of the Christ individuality into the body of the Nathan Jesus, all connection of the phantom with the ashy constituents was wiped out. Only the connection with the salt constituents remained. This is alluded to in the passage where Christ Jesus wishes to explain to his first chosen disciples, quote, through the way in which you feel yourselves united with the Christ being, a certain possibility for the future evolution of humanity will come about. It will be possible for the one body risen from the grave, that is the spiritual body, to pass over into men. That is what the Christ wished to say when he used the phrase, "Ye are the salt of the earth." All these words that we find in the Gospels reminding us of the terminology and craft language of the later alchemists, the later occultism, have the deepest imaginable significance. We do not have time to go into the alchemy here of ash and salt. Besides, I would be a poor source of information on alchemy. But I would be delighted if some of you wish to take this up and could later report on your findings. I've tried to offer some leads for such research here. You see the points. Ash is dead carbon. The philosopher's stone is living carbon. The carbon in the future body will be transparent like soft diamonds. Now, due to Lucifer's influence, mankind was thrown down from spiritual Eden into dense matter. There we would find ourselves separated from all other things and beings in order for us to develop both ego consciousness and freedom. This realm of illusion was built in part by Ahriman. We were compelled, because of the influence of Lucifer, to take this denser matter into ourselves. If the Lucifer force had not been introduced into our astral body and ego, this dense materiality would not have become as visible as it has become. Man is otherwise an invisible being, made visible in matter only through forces which enter into us under the influence of Lucifer. In the course of earthly evolution, through this influence, external substances and forces are drawn into even the domain of the phantom and penetrate it. Our evolution in this age has shifted from the primacy of the Luciferic obstacles to now the primacy of the Ahrimanic. In trying to hold us to the earth, Ahriman knows he must penetrate our phantom. So now a little lesson from occult science about the history of our phantom. From Steiner's book, Occult Science, we can learn about the conditions that preceded Earth. Interestingly, astrophysics' field of metallicity agrees that there were 3 prior solar systems, and they are necessary in order to get from the hydrogen state following the Big Bang to the heavy metal states that we have today. These prior cosmic conditions have in esotericism the name Saturn, Sun, and Moon. But to distinguish these cosmic conditions from today's cosmic bodies, we typically add the word old, thus Old Saturn, Old Sun, and Old Moon. The time of Old Saturn was a time when the beings who are now the archai were upon its human stage, and we, the humans of Earth, were at a stage similar to that of the mineral kingdom today. But back then, there was no matter, nothing physical, nothing solid, nor any water, nor any air, just degrees of warmth. The body that we related to back then continues through all of these cosmic conditions, and it is called our phantom body. It should not have ashy substances as part of its structure during Earth evolution. It is that which carries all of the gifts of the gods received since the start of Old Saturn. It is the archetype of the human physical body. During Old Sun, we received our etheric body. During Old Moon, our astral body. And during Earth, our ego. You see also the cosmic conditions following Earth evolution. Jupiter, where we will be angels to those on its human stage. Venus, where we will be like archangels, and finally Vulcan, where we will be at the archai level. For each of these, something new and deeper becomes the human stage. That which was developed during the old Saturn, Sun, and Moon periods is not the physical body that is laid aside at death. It is the phantom, the form of the physical body. We must be quite clear that to understand the physical body is not an easy thing. Above all, this understanding must not be sought for in the world of illusion, the world of Maya. We know that the foundation, the germ of this phantom of the physical body was laid down by the thrones during the old Saturn period. During the old Sun period, the spirits of wisdom worked further upon it. The spirits of movement upon the old moon, and the spirits of form during the earth period. And it is only in this period that the physical body received the phantom. We call these spirits of form because they really live in the phantom of the physical body. The phantom of the physical body is stamped upon the substances of the earth, just as the thought of an artist is stamped upon his material. One can become the master of various beings who continually go in and out of one's bodies by becoming their companion. These are phantoms in the physical body, ghosts in the etheric body, and demons in the astral body, or spirits in the ego. You see here a list of 6 items where the term phantom can apply, but cause confusion with the human phantom we are speaking about tonight. And I don't have time to go through all of those. Now, Luke traces a lineage back, as you heard, 77 generations to Adam, who he says was the Son of God. What's not said is that when Adam and Eve fell from Eden due to succumbing to the temptation of Lucifer, the Elohim knew that this new path of evolution would now take humans into a realm wherein their body would become corrupted. They realized that they had to hold back and protect their archetype of man. In the Kabbalah, that which was held back is called Adam Kadmon. In GA 94, Rudolf Steiner offered this. At first, man has within him what he later sees around him. All that is actually around us now passed out from us in a preceding epoch when our being was still mingled with the earth, moon, and sun. This cosmic being from whom the man of today and all the kingdoms of nature have issued is referred to in the Kabbalah as Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon embraced all the manifold aspects of man as we know him today, in various races and peoples and all. This phantom is a concern for Luke throughout his gospel. Now, a bit more about the phantom and the Jesus in Luke's gospel. This Jesus is born with an uncorrupted phantom, for it was Adam Kadmon. This phantom was protected by the Gautama Buddha during its life. In addition, the maternal sheaths of this Mary helped to protect the physical from conception through age 6. Her maternal etheric does so from age 7 until the merger at age 12, just before puberty could begin, and the work on the astral body. After the merger of the two, this constitution had the astral and ego of Zarathustra from the Matthew Jesus. All humans bear within them an ego that once was overcome by Lucifer's temptation. But for 3 years following the baptism, Jesus no longer bore an ego within him. Instead, he housed the Christ being. So that beginning with the baptism in Jordan, Christ Jesus bore within himself residual effects from the Matthew Jesus that had come from the Luciferic influence, but with no human ego to allow any further Luciferic influences to now enter this body. Yes, this physical, etheric, and astral bodies had residue of the earlier Luciferic influences, but no more Luciferic influence could enter because of the presence of the Christ being. The only influence upon this constitution came only from the Christ being, from baptism on. Doing similarly becomes our destiny. Thus, when Christ Jesus was crucified, when his body was nailed to the cross, the phantom was perfectly intact. It existed in a spiritual bodily form, visible only to supersensible sight. It was much more loosely connected with the body's material content of earth element than has ever happened with any other human being. In every other human being, its phantom came into connection with these elements. When Christ's body was taken down from the cross, his bodily parts were still coherent, but they had no connection anymore with the phantom. The phantom was completely free of them. When his body was placed in the tomb, it was permeated with certain substances so that the material parts then quickly volatilized and passed over into the elements. Hence, the disciples who looked into the grave found the linen cloths in which the body had been wrapped, but the phantom on which the evolution of the ego depends had risen from the grave. It is not surprising then that Mary of Magdala, Mary Magdalene, who had known only the earlier phantom when it was surrounded by earthly elements, did not recognize the same form of the phantom when she saw it, even seeing it clairvoyantly. Moreover, we must clearly understand that it was only through the power of the companionship of the disciples with the Christ that all the disciples and all those persons of whom the same is told, who could see the risen Christ, for he appeared to them in the spiritual body, the body of which Paul says that it increases as a grain of seed and passes over into all people. Paul himself is convinced that it was not a body permeated by earthly elements which had appeared to the other apostles. But what was it that convinced Paul? In a certain sense, Paul was already an initiate as Saul before the event of Damascus. His initiation had combined the ancient Hebrew principle and the Greek principle. He knew that an initiate became in his etheric body independent of the physical body and could appear in the purest form of his etheric body to those who were capable of seeing it. If Paul had had vision of a pure etheric body, independent of a physical body, he would have spoken differently. He would have said that he had seen someone who had been initiated and would be living on further in the course of Earth evolution, independently of their former physical body. He would not have found this particularly surprising. What Paul experienced on the road to Damascus could not have been that. He had experienced something which he knew could be experienced only when the scriptures were fulfilled, when a perfect human phantom, a human body risen from the grave in a supersensible form, would appear in the spiritual atmosphere of the earth. And that is what he saw. That is what appeared to him on the road to Damascus and left him with the conviction he was there. He is risen. For what is there could come only from the Christ. It is the phantom which can be seen by all human individualities who seek to relate themselves to the Christ. This is what convinced Paul that Christ was already there and that this physical body had rescued the primal form of the human physical body for the salvation of all mankind. This deed could be accomplished only through the greatest unfolding of divine love. I've mentioned a merger of the Luke Jesus at age 12, representing the priestly lineage, with the Matthew Jesus, who was several months older, of kingly descent from King Solomon. This merger involved the transfer of the Matthew Jesus spiritual entities to the Luke Jesus, that is, his ego in spiritualized astral and etheric, his manas and buddhi. After this merger, what's left of the Matthew Jesus? An astral, etheric, and physical body. And according to Rudolf Steiner, without this ego, these three sheaths will come to die a few months later. The artist here, Pinturicchio, shows the former two boys departing to no longer exist in the physical realm. Merged before the onset of puberty, the result is a new being, Jesus of Nazareth, who has the original uncorrupted phantom of Adam Kadmon, as well as its physical and etheric bodies that had been watched over by the Gautama Buddha, and has the highly evolved astral body and ego of Zarathustra from the Matthew Jesus, now working to prepare this body for the birth of Christ at the baptism. And so we'll come to an end here.